Welcome to episode 45, live from my drum room. My guest today is Michael Shrieve, um, best known for his unbelievably incredible performance at Woodstock because it's documented in the movie, but really his groundbreaking work with Carlos Santana, where he joined the band at age 19, I believe, and that drum solo, he just turned 20 years old. He performed at Woodstock, so just an amazing story and an amazing musician and a guy that I've known. We've known each other for about 35 years, and we see each other from time to time, and I'm really glad that we've reconnected. And this is another step in us staying in better contact. So thanks to all you guys for tuning in today to watch this. Um, I appreciate it. I know Michael appreciates it. And thank you, Anthony. I'm glad everything looks and sounds great. Quite different background in the drum room. Yes, Penny, a little bit different. It's good to see you, Penny. And my friend Steve Ford is taking care of the drum room, so that's good. Okay, without further ado, this is what happens. I go into this other zone of nonsense and I waste valuable time. So please welcome my very special guest, the great Michael Shrieve. And there he is.
Hey there.
Hey.
How you doing, John?
I'm doing great, Michael. How are you today, buddy?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Good. How is you mentioned earlier the weather there, it's not super hot anymore. That heat wave
Oh,
has subsided.
apparently that was an extremely unusual event. And in fact, later they called it like something like a mass human event, like 100 people died or something like that.
Oh
And
gosh.
the numbers just kept coming in that more and more, probably old folks like
Yeah.
me, were dying, or in homes that maybe places that didn't have AC and things like that. So it was very unusual. And we're not used to it. A lot of people out here still don't have air conditioners, man.
Right.
And that's deadly when there's a heat like that. So, but it's happening everywhere. 130 in the desert, 114 in Vegas. It's they're used to it there, but yeah,
Wow.
it's everywhere.
My daughter lives in Eugene, Oregon, and getting a lot of the same weather. And she was, she said it's just been unbelievable, just unbelievable.
And the fact that it's so unusual as well, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, they're not prepared for it. Like you said, she lives with her boyfriend in a house that has. By the way, everybody who's watching, I should have said Michael's coming to us from Seattle, so he's been in the midst of this, in the thick of this incredible heat wave that they had out there, and as I said, my daughter's in the same climate zone, so to speak. Um, yeah, and she grew up in Boston, and it's not a stranger to hot weather, but she said it's just been brutal, just incredibly brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boston has that humidity as well when it gets really hot, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's right now as we speak. It's about, gosh, it's here on the vineyard. It's not even 70 degrees. It's 60 something, high 60s, but really high humidity. I went out this morning for a run, and it's just it wasn't really hot, but it was just clammy. That ugh, clammy feeling. It does, you know, wreaks havoc on my hair. So, by
I
the
cut
way,
I cut all my hair off after that. In the middle of that heat thing, I just said, screw it, take it off, take it off. It'll grow back.
that's right.
Like,
It'll grow back, and it
yeah.
looks great. It looks fine. Uh, by the way, Stanley Sheldon says hello to you and to me, the great Stanley
Wow.
Sheldon.
Stanley Sheldon. Hi, Stanley Sheldon. Wow.
Yeah,
That goes back a while.
I
A lot of
know.
people that I knew on the East Coast, when I was living in New York City, I don't get a chance to see that often, but Facebook's allowed us all to reconnect with, I mean, old people, old friends from high school that you haven't seen. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not, but for the most part, it's been it's been really nice reconnecting with people.
Yeah, yeah. I would say the same thing. I know it's if you take out a lot of the other stuff that comes with it, and you just look at it as a means to connect with old friends and
Yeah,
um, and like promote a gig that you might be doing at a local club or something, and those
yeah.
kinds of things. It's good. So
It's all good as long as you don't bring up politics.
exactly,
And then all
exactly.
hell breaks loose. Then it's
I
like
know.
the Wild West, man. Just anything political. Sometimes, I know I say, well, I know, but I feel really strongly. I'm going to put this out, and it's like, damn, it's like here's the real America. It's like
Uh,
this is where we're at.
oh, that's
Now,
funny.
yeah.
I was thinking the last time I saw you in person was 2016, 5 years ago. Does that sound right? When you were on tour with
You
Carlos?
came with Danny
Yeah,
Seraphin, and
that's right.
that was really great. I just saw pictures of that recently, and and I watched some of your episode with Danny as well. So I thought, oh yeah, those guys came. That was nice. Yeah,
That was a fun night. It was. I was glad we had as much time to hang out that we had too, and you were
yeah,
very accommodating. I remember. In fact, I think when we got there, we couldn't find. Steve Smith had arranged the tickets because it
right,
was it was you guys. It was Santana and Journey,
yeah,
and Steve was doing a meet and greet or something. And I texted you, and you immediately said, "I'll meet you at the gate or the door or something." And you brought Danny and I back, and
yeah.
yeah, that was a great. And you
Well,
played beautifully.
oh, thank you. Yeah, I wish that tour could have extended throughout the summer, but alas, that was the last one. So, which is kind of a shock to all of us, to tell you the truth. But it was really great to see you and Danny. God, who else did we see that night? There's a woman, and I'm forgetting her name, that, she used to be a clothing designer in the East Village back in the
Oh,
day. All that stuff you see Miles wearing and Jimi Hendrix, she made all that stuff.
no kidding.
Yeah, and she started all this thing, and she was good friends with Betty Davis and Devon, Jimi Hendrix's girlfriend. Anyway, that was the scene. It was just like these beautiful women making these beautiful clothes and these monster musicians wearing them. And she was there that night. I hadn't seen her for many moons.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm forgetting her name, but yeah, good
I
to see
I
her.
remember I remember sitting in the green room after your show, and we were having a glass of wine, and you introduced me to Michael Carabello,
Yeah,
and it was great to meet him, and it was definitely a hang. I mean, there were like a lot of cool folks there, and it kind of felt like almost probably I shouldn't say what it would have been like to be there in the 60s, but there was definitely a vibe of like a lot of like people of notoriety coming out to see you guys from New York. They were just Michael, I think Michael had a group of friends there from Connecticut or New York that he
yeah,
introduced me to. And
yeah.
yeah, yeah, it was, and I was just going to say, Michael, as I was thinking about us doing this today, I was thinking about your lineage of like how you mentioned Hendrix and like you knew all those cats, you hung with all those guys. That's just it
Well,
must have been incredible.
the truth is, I never met Jimmy, and everybody else did. I think they went to the studio one time, like on 8th, at Jimmy's studio, um, Electric Ladyland, of course. And
Yeah, yeah.
but I never met the guy. I always wanted to, but I found out later one of his producers told me that he wanted to have a band with me playing drums, and I was like, dude, you should have called. You know, should have called me. I
Yeah.
would have loved that. Um, and apparently, Jimmy mentioned to Carlos at that famous Jimmy Plays Berkeley show that he wanted to actually join Santana. he liked the rhythm section, and he, you know, um,
Wow.
that was the thing. So, but I never met him. But I think sometimes it's just as well there's a few people you don't meet so that they can always be there in mythological terms with you, you know,
Yeah. Yep.
like that. Sometimes you meet your heroes and it's disappointing.
Well, yeah, we know about that, and yeah, I don't know why. I assumed, based on the fact that you guys traveled in the same circles, so to
Yeah,
speak, that you would
yeah,
have. You must had you met? Did you meet Mitch Mitchell? You must have known Mitch.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So I knew Mitch, pretty much like till the day he died. I mean, we
Yeah.
we weren't in touch all the time, um, but when he was in town, I go see him. I asked him to come. I used to play a weekly gig here in Seattle for like 7 years. I played weekly, and guys when they're in town, they would come down. Vinny and all these people, and I asked him to come down, but he didn't come down. I know he was thinking I was going to ask him to sit in, um, and he didn't want to do that, and I
Yeah.
understand that, but I would have honored that, just so he can
Sure.
come and hang out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always related to Mitch and his playing because of his Elvin influence.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think if it wasn't for Elvin Jones, just think how much different Jimi Hendrix's band would have sounded.
That's a great way of looking at it. You're right.
It's
You're
really,
absolutely right.
it's really true. I mean, all that triplet stuff. Um, I forget the tune.
Oh, manic depression.
Yeah, manic depression and that
Yeah.
stuff. That's really a rock version of Jimmy's. I mean, Elvin's feel.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I
Yep.
always felt like that with Jack DeChristopher when he played with Miles, and they were doing the backbeat stuff. With Chick and Ayrto and Michael Henderson and stuff, and Dave Holland. But I always thought, man, the way that he's playing a backbeat is not like the R&B drummers, but I really loved it. It
Yeah.
was like, that little 16, 18-inch bass drum. If you could like go anywhere, and yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You already have a couple of questions. If I can run these by you, Michael. My
Sure.
friend Anthony Cucina, who is a regular on these shows, which I really appreciate, wanted to ask you if you could talk a little bit about how the Stick People got started and
Okay.
how you got the gig with Carlos.
Okay. Stick people. Let's start with that. Hello,
Sure.
Anthony. Um, well, these are stick people. Is David Garibaldi, Mike Clark, Lenny White, Greg Orico, and myself.
Hmm.
So everybody's from the Bay Area except for Lenny. He's from New York. But Lenny spent a lot of time in the Bay Area during that period when all our bands were coming up and growing. Greg was Sly and the Family Stone. Mike Clark with Herbie Hancock and the other funk stuff. David, of course, with Tower of Power, and myself with Santana. So Lenny was out there frequently. He played in a band with Coke Escovedo and Pete Escovedo, and they had all the great players in San Francisco. And Lenny was completely into it, and he just loved being in San Francisco and the scene that was going on there. And we became really close friends. You can see this picture in the background there to the right.
Yes. Yep.
That's me and Lenny, like when we're like 18 or something, probably 20. But Jim Marshall took that, the great photographer. And so Lenny and I have always been really, really like brothers, um, because we shared a love for the jazz stuff, but we were totally into all the other stuff that was going on, like the R&B and rock stuff. And um, the scene was exciting. Okay, how did stick people get together? Um, so we were taught when the epidemic happened. We were talking we were doing Zoom since April of 2020, and we were doing it, and I was recording it, every one of them. And really, we did it 3 times a week for almost a year, just
Wow.
just us. And it got to the point, John and Anthony, where we just couldn't wait to get back on with each other. You know, it was like a men's club, you know. And so we'd talk about, anything, and health issues, of course, and how are you dealing with this, like a bunch of old men, right? And 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 then we started having some guests, and it was very unorganized, and we were, um, down the road. We started talk. People were approaching us, like film people and that kind of thing, to see, let's do something, and nothing really ever happened. But David Garibaldi knew a fellow named Mike Charlash, and Mike is a promoter type of guy, but he took over producing the thing and made sense of it, and got an editor and made it like professional.
Mhm.
So ever since then, I mean, we've got a whole bunch of people that are still in the can, and some that we have to redo because we got better at it later. You know
Yeah,
how it
yeah.
is. So, I mean, Mike made sure we all got like lights and camera and action and stuff like that on a minimal level, but at least to make it look a little professional. So, I mean, so we have Billy Cobb that just came out. We've got Antonio Sanchez, Mark Juliana, Peter Erskine, Stanley Clark. I know I'm forgetting somebody. Um, so Billy just came out, and that was really a great one. And everybody's been really. It's like a brotherhood, you know. You know this. If
Sure.
anybody would know, you know. And so now we do the interviews, but we really try to be prepared, and have good questions, and at the same time leave room. It's kind of like music, you know. Um, and we
Yep.
have John Schofield coming up, and we have like a really good one with Steve Jordan, but the lighting is terrible, so maybe we can redo that. We got a good one with Charlie Hunter that the lighting's not good. Larry Graham, we had on, and then we had technical problems, but he'll be coming up too. And so it's just started as a bunch of guys talking 3 times a week on Zoom. And then we decided, which some of those conversations are worth editing and putting out, a lot of life stuff, a lot of fun, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but everybody was like, and it's right at dinner time too. So everybody's everybody it's important to everybody. And we've been off for a while David Garibaldi and Gregorico have been in Italy. Um, and we'll start back up again soon. But we've got stuff in the can that needs to be edited, and so that's how that started. And we don't know where it's going to go, but ever since Mike Charlotte came on, it's really upped the game, and now we feel really comfortable, and we're really proud of looking at it, and So we're also learning, like we're getting lessons from him in Instagram and Facebook, and like we all post stuff, but now it's like, oh, there's a whole nother level to this thing if you want, you know.
Yeah.
So that's 6 people, and then how did I get Carlos? Going to take up the whole show. Long story short, I used to go to Fillmore West all the time. I would drive up in my father's car from Redwood City, where I lived, and go see that was the Mecca, I'd go see Charles Lloyd, and I'd go see B.B. King, and I saw Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page, I think, together with the Yardbirds, I think, I saw
Wow.
Cream there and everybody. So it was the Mecca. And I saw that Michael Bloomfield was playing, but Michael Bloomfield was like the American Eric Clapton.
Hmm.
And he played on all early Dylan stuff when he went electric. but he played in the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, and they put out some records like East West that, to me, kind of defined the sound of the Fillmore. You know, if I hear that song, that modal jamming on there, I can smell the incense, I can smell the pot, I can see the apples that Bill Graham put out for the people, and I can see the pretty hippie chicks dancing, moving and stuff. It all comes back, you know, like a flood of emotion as well. So Michael Bloomfield was playing a thing called the Super Session with Al Cooper and Stephen Stills.
Yes. Yep.
I called up my friends and I said, let's go see if we can sit in, literally. And nobody said, oh, yeah, sure, that sounds great. Actually, there's one person that did. Then he said, hold on one second. He talked to his girlfriend and then he said, I think I'm going to stay in tonight. And at that moment, I realized that's not going to happen with me. The guy wanted to go, right? Anyway.
Yeah. And you were about 18 or 19, you were 19 at the time?
Oh, really?
Or
I was probably
before
19,
that?
18, 19, yeah.
18, 19. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I borrowed my father's car. I went up there, went into the Fillmore, went straight up to the stage because I was scared to death. So I went straight up to Bloomfield and I pulled on his pants and I said, hey, I'm a drummer. Do you think I could sit in? You know, I'm just waiting for him to kick me in the face or just say, get out of here. Either one would have been appropriate. And so he said, instead, he said, man, the drummer's a really nice guy. Let me go ask him. And now I'm like, oh man, I didn't plan on that, you know. So next thing I know, I'm on the stage. And I'm so traumatized that later I don't remember a note I played. Truly. Like a dream. And so then I went backstage at the Fillmore now. It's like, you know.
Yeah.
And the manager and the bass player for Santana were there, and they said, hey, and I was a fan of Santana. And they said, we're with a band called Santana, and we're thinking of changing drummers. Can we get your number? And so I gave my number, but I never really heard from them. I went to see them again, touch base. And then I went to a recording studio where I was always hustling time for my own groups. And as I'm walking in, John, literally, and I've told this story a million times, but it's quite a story. As I'm walking in through the door, the drummer in Santana is walking out. Now, I didn't know they were going to be there or anything. I was down there hustling, and they were recording their first album.
Wow.
And they had a big falling out with the drummer. Now, the guys that saw me at Fillmore remembered me and invited me to jam in the studio. And by
Excuse
the end
me,
of
one
the
second.
yeah.
Alexa, stop. Sorry, my wife set an alarm.
Alexa. So where was I? So they asked me to play, and I played. And at the end of that, I think it was quite a while. We went through a lot of stuff. They took me in a side room, and they literally asked me, "Do you want to join the band?" Right then and there.
Wow.
And I said, you know, let me check my schedule. This is the story I told at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And so here's what happened. They literally followed me home to my parents' house. I woke up my parents and I said, okay, this is where I get off. I'm going to go up to the city now. And I joined this band. And they were like, okay, see you later. And I went up to the city with them in the Mission District, and I slept on the couch, you know, for a long time. And then I was in the band.
Wow. which is, at 19 years old, I mean, you
Yeah,
sleep on the couch, it doesn't matter,
really. So
it,
I was sleeping on couches anyway, you know. Um, but yeah, it was a really great experience for me. Prior to that whole experience, like a year earlier, even or 6 months, I was perhaps going to play with Jefferson Airplane.
okay.
They were they were huge, you know. They were
Yeah,
like
yeah.
them and the Grateful Dead. They were like the hippie mecca, and I got to know them somehow. I go over to their house. Had a mansion on Fulton Street, and it was like a Georgian mansion, like the hippies like broke through. And I even flew with Jack Cassidy and Yorma to LA. Like they invited me to come to LA while they're recording Bathing at Baxter's, this record.
Hmm.
So here I am, this like 19-year-old kid or whatever I am. We're staying at the Tropicana Hotel. I'm probably on a couch again. And, you know, Jim Morrison drops by, says hello to Yorma. Eric Clapton comes by with a cassette of a group that he's super excited about called The Band.
Wow.
And it was before the record came out. I go to the studio that night, and David Crosby comes down and brings them a song called Triad and teaches it to them. And they recorded it on the album. And I realize now the engineer was Al Schmidt,
Oh,
who just
man.
passed,
Yeah, legendary. Yeah.
And so I felt like, what's the guy's name that Tom Hanks played?
Oh, Forrest Gump.
I felt like Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
Here I am, this kid, and I'm flying a plane with these guys, and Jim Morrison comes by, and I'm like,
Oh,
you know. So long story short about that, I never ended up joining Jefferson Airplane, and I think that was like a real divine intervention there, because Santana was really great for me to be in, and
yeah.
I can play that music better than I could play the Jefferson Airplane music, I think. And so that's how it was. When I got in the band, I wasn't really a Latin player. I studied out of a Ted Reed book, Latin, and got some basics. But every time I played with Santana and they did the Latin thing, I would always swing on the cymbal. I
Hmm.
never played any Latin rhythms, not
Yeah.
really. They did, the percussionist, and then I'd swing it like a jazz drummer. And so I think that's part of the reason it made it like a little bit different. Like it wasn't like New York salsa, something like
Yeah.
that. So
I think that you're right. I think that in my little small amount of knowledge on the subject, but I think you're right. I think that there's definitely a swing in what you play, and um, that sort of contrast, I guess, maybe to what the percussionists were playing.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
more
I mean,
traditional Latin.
even there, Carabello was not your regular traditional conga either.
Hmm.
So, and Chapito on timbales and congas was from Nicaragua. So there was a little bit of different thing than like the Cuban or Puerto Rican sort of thing. But I was really glad that it fit, because I could play that, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I wouldn't sound like I wouldn't sound like I didn't know what I was doing.
Well, far from it, man. I mean, I want to just skip back just a little bit before that. So you probably, I'm guessing, started playing at a young age. I mean, if you were playing at the level you were playing at 18, then I'm guessing you started pretty young, right?
I started like in 8th grade.
Wow. Okay. So about 13, age 13,
Yeah,
12,
right.
13.
And then in high school, I played in everything I could. I mean, I was a big fan of the Rudiments. I played in the youth drum corps in my city. I played in the marching bands at school, and took a lot of crap from people, just because you're in that band.
Yeah.
the football players and you're in the band. It's like the drama kids, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
You had the
not,
last laugh, though, Michael.
oh, I certainly did. And I remember some of those guys that were not too kind to me. I mean, not kind at all. Like thinking, you know, oh, what? You think I'm stupid enough to get in a fight with you? You know, it's like
Yeah, yeah.
even the coach of that school made fun of me in front of like 2 classes, and I got suspended for what I said. He tried to make me lift these weights, you know, and he was the football coach, and he didn't like me. And I had a peace, you know, I wore a peace sign, and you
Yeah.
know, I was it's funny because I never thought of myself as a hippie later. I never did. I at any rate, so he tried to make me lift these weights in front of everybody, knowing that I'm not going to be able to do it, you know.
Mm.
And so I just looked at him and I looked at people and I said, "You think I'm a fucking idiot? You know, you think I'm going to sit here and let you make fun of, you know?" And I told him, "Go fuck yourself." It was
Good for
a
you.
Catholic all boys school, and so you know,
Yeah. Oops.
so, so then my senior year I spent at another high school.
Well,
So that what that leads to is a couple of those guys. I got a message like backstage. These 2 guys that used to like push my books and do all this, you know, and they wanted to come in and say hello and look at it. And I said, never heard of them.
good for you.
That's about as cruel as I get, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But
That's great.
yeah,
I mean, it wasn't long after that. I mean, it wasn't long after high school that you were, you know, at Woodstock. I mean, that just had to be
yeah,
unbelievable. And so your influences, we offline before we were live, you were talking about, and you mentioned Elvin, of course, in terms of like his influence on Mitch Mitchell and Jimi Hendrix, and I know Elvin was a big influence on you. And was it mostly jazz drummers that
yeah,
influenced you in those years? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it was Elvin came later because he was so complex, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, I came up with the big band stuff, Gene Krupa, um, you know, drum and you know all that
Yeah.
stuff. I
Yeah.
played it in my bedroom, but I didn't even have a drum set. I mean, I had a paper route, and I bought 2 Japanese snares, and I had a cymbal from somewhere. I
Wow.
mean, the drum kit that I played at Woodstock was the first drum kit I ever owned, and I bought that while I was on the road right after high school. You know, I never even had my own drum set all through high school.
No kidding. I
I was
I had no. Yeah.
I was borrowing. I was doing this. I was doing, you know.
Wow. Well, you
Yeah,
you were you were put on this earth to play the drums, because how do you not have a drum set, and be that good, and then a year after getting a drum set, play in front of
yeah,
the biggest concert, you know.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I love the jazz guys, and you know, of course, I was playing in big band in junior college, and that really turned me around.
Hmm.
That was an experience that was so critical to, you know, just like big band drummers and like how to set up the hits and all that. But it was also during that period where I learned what the hippest stuff what was going on was in the small groups, like Miles Davis, you know, with Tony,
Yeah. Yep.
um, you know, Art Blakey, and he had, you know, Wayne Shorter too before, you know, everybody. All those small groups were really happening. And then I started playing at a place in Palo Alto where I was playing jazz, like an organ group. And then I would play on the other side of the highway in a all black club in the house band. So I back up people like BB King and Etta James and you know people who didn't have a band.
Hmm.
And I was the only white person in the club, I swear. And plus I looked like I was 10 years old, so it was you know girls would come like, "Can I touch your hair?" You know. But so I was playing a lot of R&B, and I, I appreciated the Beatles and the Stones, and I'm a big fan of all the British pop music. I'm a
Yeah.
sucker for it, you know. Like the Hollies, I just love the Hollies and the Zombies and Dino Danelli with the Young Rascals,
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so I was taking everything in, and I wasn't too much of a snob,
I wouldn't think, I wouldn't have thought so. I mean, I knew you old, after all that, we met about 30 something years ago, but you strike me as someone that had an open mind to all that music. You weren't a jazzer who was just going to dismiss, the
Yeah,
rock and roll guys. And you answered a question I had. I wondered if maybe, and I'm guessing that when the Beatles came along in like '64, you were you weren't as influenced by them as say some of these other you're kind of you were in a different place, but
yeah. But I
yeah.
tell you what, I mean, I would learn those beats, I would learn Ticket to Ride, and I would, um, but for me, it was Ringo. It was the sound too, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Sound,
absolutely. Yeah.
hi hat, open, and 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 I was very aware, even young, that what the drummer is doing is creating a, an extra level of excitement in the frequency, you know, because of that open hi hat,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that made it just like excited everything, and so it made it really. It gave it a what's the word? Urgency, you
Mm.
know,
Yep.
like which is what you want when you're young. It's like it made the music urgent and yeah, good.
Yeah.
I love the Stones too. I took great delight in learning, like Satisfaction and that kind of thing. And then figuring out later in time, like other records that had that beat. I mean, the groove that I play on Black Magic Woman, I learned from a BB King record that I bought for 59 cents. And it was called BB Plays the Mambo or something like that. And it had dance steps on the back cover. And so I learned stuff like that. And I learned that, that's a blues groove, really. It's like no, it was BB Plays the Cha-Cha.
Wow.
But yeah. And
That's
then and then
wow.
I fell in love with like um, Charles Lloyd with Keith and Jack DeJohnette and Dave Holland on bass. Was that who it was? So
Probably.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
fourth flower period, I was somehow I got really turned around by these group like players like Jack and Tony, um, and then there were rock drummers too and R&B drummers that every time James Brown came out with the record, I was all over it.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, that was like a feather in my hat, that's like um, I would go down to clubs and play that stuff as soon as it came out. It's like
Yeah.
it's like okay, I got this. And here's this like 15-year-old looking white dude coming in. So so a lot of the brothers like they liked me.
Yeah.
They liked me, and same for at school too. So you could play that shit, and they
You
they
had the respect. Yeah.
and they got your back. So
Yeah.
these football players. I told my son Sam that when he was going to school too. He's playing drums. I said, "You learn this James Brown stuff or this funky thing, you're gonna have respect with all the brothers in the school, just like that."
Yeah.
And he did it, and it was true. So
And the chicks will dig him too.
just to dig you too. Yeah,
Yeah. And so just to jump ahead, so you get the gig with Carlos, you record that first record with him.
yeah.
And that's before Woodstock, right? That was leading up to that summer.
That record didn't even come out before Woodstock. So when
Right.
we played Woodstock, And I didn't realize this until 5 or 10 years ago. I forgot that we played Woodstock without an album out. So not most of the groups, people were familiar with the music.
Yeah, yeah.
Santana, they had never heard it before. And so it's even more special, I think, that we won them over without them being familiar with the music.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. I think I read that recently, but I assumed there was at least a record or two out by then.
No,
Wow.
yeah.
And
So
and and Soul Sacrifice wasn't on the first record, right?
it was, but it was a
It
very
was.
chopped version. It was nothing special except it was the tune. Um, and so it just became a thing with that song is the drum solo song.
Mm.
It was improvised most every night. I definitely like it was space for me to use all my rudiments, my hand stuff. Like when you say, "Wow, you didn't have a drum set in high school," but I had snare drums, so I would go through the Buddy Rich books and the rudiments, and I had really good teachers like Anthony Cerrone at one point, and
Oh yeah.
Pete Magadini, and Michael Carvin. They were all really important in my life. Um, so yeah, Soul Sacrifice was just improvised. When people tell me I learned it, I'm like, you should have learned the one from Tanglewood.
I think you've said that. You've told me that you like that solo better, that performance better.
Yeah, I mean, I could never really listen to the Woodstock performance. I didn't care for it,
Oh,
but when I watch it, I get it because it's so the whole band is so vigorous, and the solo was really great to look at, like it's better to look at with the sound than just hear it. I've found. So
well, that's you being your own biggest critic.
yes, it is. Yeah, when I
Yeah.
listen, I go when I stop playing the groove and I'm going, "Good man, what are you doing?" I say that now. You got 500,000 people. Keep the groove going. Keep the groove going.
No, I wouldn't change a thing with that
God,
drum
no,
solo.
neither would I. And so Woodstock became prevalent in all our lives. And it's been that kind of thing where it's a love hate thing for me for many years. I can tell it's about 35, 33, something. I'm living in New York and walking down Fifth Avenue, and I'd see people and people would be like, "Hey, Mike Shrieve," and they go like, "Wow, you're getting older," and I'm like, you know, yeah, wow, you too. And anyway, Woodstock was all anybody. I had bands, I had Automatic Man, I had Novo Combo, I had done solo records, I'd done this and that, and all I hear is about Woodstock. So I
Yeah.
used to spend a lot of energy like saying, "Oh, have you heard my latest this? Have you heard this?" Finally, I just said, "You know what? Shut up. Just shut up. Just shut up." And be gracious and say, "Thank you very much. That's very kind of you," and be grateful that you've done something that means so much to so many people and let it go. And then just live your life like you want to live it now. Make the
Yeah.
music you want to make, do anything you want, and then just be gracious about Woodstock instead of sick and tired of it. And so that day I taught myself a lesson, so
Yeah.
be grateful. Don't, and also
That's
I always had this thing is like when you grow older, promise yourself you'll never be a bitter old man, no matter what happens. You know, just don't be that guy. Don't get bitter and this and that. Oh, well, I should have gone. I should have this. And people should have. It's like no, let it go. Just enjoy it. Just do what you want to do. You don't have to answer to anybody. Just
yeah.
do what you want to do and don't complain. Basically.
That's great advice. No, yeah, I mean, we talked about this offline, I know, and it had to have been. that had to have gotten old, constantly people just sort of only fixating on that. But like you say, I think as we get older too, you can look back at that now and be so proud of it. It was such an important moment in time. It will be something that 100 years from now people will still be talking about. I firmly believe that. I think you do too. That it's just such an important part of history. And man, I mean, if when I see footage of that, I know you had just turned 20, like a month before, but you look about 14.
I
That's
know.
that's the funny thing. You look, I mean, you and you still have that baby face. And I saw the somewhat recently. I was watching Gimme Shelter, and there's that clip um, where you and Jerry Garcia are talking, and I think Phil Lesh maybe.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
a quick
yeah.
clip of you guys, and so were you guys, and not to get off on that tangent, but were
Uh,
you guys scheduled to play that day? Was Santana supposed to be on the bill that day?
we did play.
You did play, okay.
Yeah, we did play. And I tell you, um, as great as Woodstock was, this was just the opposite. And
Yeah,
it was literally frightening to be on the stage. First of all, it was so low. It was only about
yeah,
12 inches up. And then the Hells Angels were all around the stage. And they were really intimidating and they were, really messed up. I
mm,
know there was one guy that had that like coyote hat on or something and a beard. And I felt for the first time in my life a force that I called evil, you know,
yeah,
and I who goes there, but I realized this is an energy. This is an energy, and this energy is really dark. And so as soon as we got done, I said, this is not going to go well. And I went over to the helicopter place, and just stood there waiting. I didn't care what anybody else was going to do or anything. I didn't want to hear anything. And I got out of there. And so when I was on my way out, Jerry and Phil came, and they couldn't believe that the Hell's Angels were doing stuff. It
mm,
was beyond their like, and so I mean they beat the shit out of Marty Ballin, and I told him about that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
uh, anyway, so we
yeah,
declined to be in the movie. We when we were in London, we went to a showing of it with Charlie Watts and Mick Jagger, and in retrospect, I wish we would have been in the film um, because just for historical value.
hmm,
But at the time, we didn't want to be associated with something so dark, and I regret that now. I'd love to see the footage and hear it. And we played well all the time, you know.
yeah, yeah,
We didn't really we rehearsed all the time. So that I think of the bands in San Francisco that rehearsed more than others. It was Santana and Sly and the Family Stone. Greg said they rehearsed a lot, and so that's how you get good is by really, rehearsing. I think people don't do that anymore.
mm, hmm, yeah. Well, that footage must exist somewhere. I mean, they did capture it, but you just opted to not have it in the movie, so
Yeah, so it's
it's
somewhere. I know it was a
somewhere.
Maisel Brothers film, and
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, it'd be good to see it. It'd be great to see it.
yeah. Well, I guess on a positive note, that same year, I mean, Altamont was only a few months after Woodstock, and
Yeah,
you kind of, you have such a great documented, um, performance already. So but I know what you're saying. Now looking at it 50 some odd years later, it would be nice to see it, just
yeah,
for historical purposes. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Um, I was just going to say, Michael, a lot of people have asked, and
yeah.
and I remember seeing that your Ludwig kit was up for auction a few years ago, and people are asking if you still have it, um, or where that is. I
Yeah,
forget what ended up happening with it.
yeah. I don't have it anymore. I held on to it for a long time. It's about 4 or 5 years ago. I put it up for auction, and the highest bidder was the Musicians Hall of Fame Museum in Nashville, Tennessee. So I got to get down there sometime. They've got it set up really nice. It's real respectful, and it looks great. So that's where it is.
Okay, there you go. That's great.
First drums I ever owned.
First drum set, yeah, man.
And I also lost them. I sold them to somebody because I was kind of even though I wasn't a hippie, I was of this frame of mind, like, the past is dust, and so, don't hold on to things and stuff like that, So there's a few things I regret, like getting rid of. So I was living in New York City. I came out to visit my brother Rich, who was working at Bank of America downtown San Francisco. And a colleague of his came up to me and said, "Hey, Mike, nice to see you. My brother still has those drums you sold him." And I said, because I was wondering, I forgot where they were. I forgot what, what I do with them. And I said, "By any chance, are those drums pink?" And he said, "Yeah, I believe they are." And I said, "By any chance, can I get your brother's number?" And I called him and I said, "I would like to get those drums back. Is that possible?" And he said, "You were always really nice to me. Just give me enough money for like a secondhand drum set and come and get them." So
that's great.
I gave him like $600, and I rented a car and went there then and there before he changed his mind. And I got my drums back. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's a happy story. You don't hear that happen too often.
Yeah.
And he didn't do anything crazy to him too, which is good. He didn't decide to put Yamaha or Pearl tom holder on it or something crazy,
I didn't update it in that way. The drums sound really great. In fact, when I did the Santana reunion that you were there, DW and John Good and Scott Garrison were good enough to try to make those drums like 3-ply and in pink champagne, and they were great. I still have those, but yeah, that was nice because I wanted to try to get that sound, that real, thin, not like 8-ply or something like that.
Yeah. Those your drums sounded great that night, and the drums, when you think about too how you were recording back then too, the difference, and many people would probably say that made all the difference was the fact that you were using tape, and maybe they were vintage microphones, but you had such a great organic drum sound on those records, and at Woodstock. Yeah.
And I didn't do anything. I never taped them or anything. I always insisted that they be open, like the jazz guys,
Yeah.
I wanted that open sound. I didn't want that 70s muffled dead sound. I did one thing like that for a Education record, which the drums really have that funk, no ring, just but otherwise I like the snare ringing. That's why I always like the chrome Ludwig snare. In fact, it's right over there against the wall, against that symbol of Elvin's.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Man, you know what I'm doing, John, for the first time? These drums here, they are silent. They're foam inside. And I am triggering the Pearl Mimic Pro. You know that?
I don't know that, no.
So being in this isolation has really made me want to get a setup where I can record from home, but I'm not really engineer, and I didn't want to engineer over every time. So this week I've finally got this. I had a guy named Al Adinolfi make the drums from a DW PDP kit, and make them trigger really well with the Pearl. It's unbelievable how they sound. I mean, they're you know, there's 128 gigs of sound in there, and it's amazing. So I'm hoping now I can, you know, send people files and stuff like that, and I can just do it in my own DAW
Yeah.
and go from there. You know, I
And
don't
you're
have.
using not electronic symbols as well. It looks like you're triggering.
I'm experimenting with it for the first time. Um, you know, I'm gonna have to get used to it. I'll have to tweak them, but already it's so fun, um, and they sound amazing. They just sound so. You know, I've always been into electronics, but I never use the electronics for drum sounds. I use
Mm.
them for, you know, left of center and, you know, not corny, but, you know, so I'm going to build a thing around this. You see, now I also have the sensory percussion sensors on there.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with them?
Yes. Yep.
Um, so since they're foam and they're silent, I could conceivably, I'm still tweaking it, but have all the sensory percussion stuff, choose to have it with the acoustic drums or just mute the acoustic drums and or mute a single acoustic drum and have one of them set up for melodic or whatever I want with the other thing. So I'm excited. I mean, I'm excited about working on new stuff, you know. But I've got this Elvin Jones book that I'm working on too that Rob Wallace is going to put out. So my whole place is filled with CDs and DAT tapes of interviews with Elvin, and it's going to be really nice. It's just
And you've
conversation.
been working on that a long time, right? I feel like we talked about
Well,
that.
here's what happened with the pandemic. I brought to life stuff that's been sitting around for 20 years. And I said, let's finish these things. They're they're of real value and they demand your attention and time. I also have a record that I just finished the artwork for called Drums of Compassion, which I started 20 years ago, which I'm playing like 16 drums standing up in a semicircle. The idea was more like a meditation record. The question I asked myself when I came home at 2 a.m., what kind of record would I like to listen to right now
Mm.
as a drummer? What could I make? Because I like to listen to choral music. When I come home from listening to bands, I don't want to hear some slamming drumming. I want to hear chill, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
So that record's got Jack DeJohnette and Olatunji and Ayrto and Pete Lockett and Trey Gunn and Amon Tobin. So it's an important record to me. I'm anxious to get that out as well.
It's fantastic. Yeah. And
Yeah,
um, any idea when the book will be done and when that might be out?
I do
Oh,
not.
the you don't.
I
Yeah. Okay.
don't
Yeah.
know. We've gone through our third person, like, you know, assisting me. I don't know if I'm a problem or what, but you know.
Well, I feel like I I was on a Tony Williams clinic tour in 1996, and I remember we were in. Were you living in Portland, Oregon at that time, or were you still in Seattle area, Tacoma,
It was Linwood, Washington.
Linwood, Washington? Okay, you were there. We chatted.
Yeah.
Gosh, 25 years ago, if you can believe that. And
Uh,
I
uh,
remember
Scott Garrison was there too, right?
that's right. He was Tony's drum tech at
Right,
the time. Yeah,
right.
and it wasn't working for DW yet, but
Yeah,
he was Tony's tech. And you and I had met, I think, about 10 years before that when I was at DW. And so
yeah.
we reconnected, and I feel like you told me then that you were maybe in the early process of starting the book on Elvin. Is that, or maybe you were thinking of it? Is that?
I don't know. It's been going on so long. I kind of made the mistake of telling Elvin like you should have to do a book, and he said, "Well, wow, why don't you do it?" And I foolishly said, "Okay," you know. So I traveled with him all over. I went to Greece with him and Keiko on their holiday. I went to Detroit. I met his, childhood friends. Um,
Hmm.
I interviewed a lot of people, and then it just sat there, because I'd give it to agents and they say this isn't a book, you know, and I realized I'm not I'm not the biographer. It's not going to happen.
Mm.
So, but when the pandemic came and I committed to finishing these projects, I said, and talking with Rob Wallace at Hudson Music, said let's do it where it's just what it is. It's conversations with Elvin.
Oh, yeah.
It's me sitting down with Elvin. I mean, that alone, it's so the value of the material is it's because he's so majestic. You know what I mean, John?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
aside from being down and dirty, I mean, this guy, when you read the words back, the level of intelligence is really amazing. So, uh,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. So,
So deep, and I think you've hit gold with that idea of conversations with Elvin. That's what us drummers. That's what we all want to read, see, and hear.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've got some
That's
footage too, and I've got some live footage too that I'm still trying to find, but I've got it. And I
yeah.
paid for several nights of recording film with Elvin here in Seattle, like 4 camera shoot type of thing. So he's got great footage of him, like that underhand style on the hi hat. You know,
Yeah. Yep.
that's so bizarre to look at. Anyway, you know,
Oh, that's I can't wait for that. And you were I want to say you were at his 75th birthday party at the
I
Blue
was,
Note.
and they made me get
Yeah.
up and play as well. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, that was
Yeah.
I played Happy Birthday, and that bass drum was 18-inch, but man, it was loud. And I hit it one time, and I thought, shit, that's loud. Like, I mean, you got everybody in the audience, Um,
Yeah.
but it was fine. And
It was
the
a
next
wild
time we
night.
saw each other was at his funeral.
I know. I know. Yeah, I know, man. That was yeah, it's I this is this is all about you today, but I feel really blessed to have known him
Yeah,
and I knew him later in his life, but man, just so I thank God that I was able to be around when he was around, and
yeah,
and some of the most amazing times of my life were spent with him. Dinners and
yeah.
at his house, at his apartment in New York, and when he'd come to Boston. And I'll just tell you a quick, funny. You might have even been at this event. It was I think they did this one time at Lincoln Center, the Jazz Awards, and I want to say the year was 1998 because it was the summer before we honored him at Berkeley. Him and Max and Louis Bellson and Roy Haynes. We had the American Drummers Achievement Awards, and of course Elvin was part of that. So we went down to New York and had dinner with Max Roach, which was amazing. And then Elvin presented an award, and so and you of all people can appreciate this. He's he's up there giving a speech, and as he's talking, he's got that kind of low voice, and he's
Yeah.
kind of understated. And this bell like a fire alarm starts going off in the venue. It says ding, 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 and everybody's we're sort of all just at the edge of our seat waiting for this thing to stop so we can hear Elvin. And finally he he goes up to the microphone and he said, it just kept going on. He said, dinner is served. And it brought the house down. It was classic Elvin.
Yeah, he had an incredible sense of humor. Yeah.
uh,
And he wouldn't
yeah.
say anything bad, really. Like when I was part of the book is I ask him about different drummers, and so he gives his thoughts on drummers and stuff like that. And then some of them, um, without saying I don't really care for the way he plays, the worst he would say is, "Well, it's better than stealing hubcap."
Yes. Oh, I know. He was such a positive, like just, I
Yeah,
mean, never without a smile on his face, at least that I ever saw,
yeah,
just,
yeah.
oh, man.
Well, John, I mean, the drummers that you've known it's like a history of drumming, that you become friends with, and it's just spectacular. Um, the people that have been in your life,
Well,
in terms of
yeah,
drumming, is what I'm referring to. But yeah, it's amazing.
well, thanks for saying that, Michael. You included, of course. And I definitely, I count my blessings. I feel like I hit the lottery when it comes to that. And that I'm still in contact with so many of these people like yourself that
Yeah,
we can do these types of things, and you can share this because you've got a lot of people watching right now that are really enjoying this. In fact, I want to tell you that you might know Phil Gould. He's the really fabulous drummer with the band Level 42.
yeah,
And he's watching, and he said, "I always loved the rhythm section of Mike and Doug Roch,
yeah.
one of the greatest." Is that Automatic Man?
No, that was
That's
Santana.
Oh, that was
Uh,
Santana. Okay.
yeah, Dougie Rauch came in. We played a show. Um, that's Phil, right? You're talking about
Yeah.
asking me.
Yep.
Well, hello, Phil. For starters, I'm a big fan as well, and
Yeah.
the we played a show in Accra, Ghana, in Africa, and we were on a plane. That's where I met Dougie Rauch. Dougie was
I see.
playing with a group called the Voices of East Harlem, and we were on a plane. Get this, with Ike and Tina Turner, Wilson Pickett, the Staple Singers, Roberta Flack, um, that saxophone, Eddie Harris, and Les McCann. Um, yeah, and they were all on a chartered plane, and that was a whole trip. Um, there's stories in the stories, but I met Dougie on the side of the stage. We were watching something, maybe even an African group, but we started talking funk, and he was all about funk, like Ohio Players and this, that, and the other. And I told him that I live with David Garibaldi, and David used to live in my house in Mill Valley, and he lit up because he's super knew all the hippest funk, and so I invited him out, and he came out and he started playing in a couple of groups out there, and then we got him in Santana, and it really changed things up. He was of the level of like like Larry Graham and funk. He was doing the thumb thing, like some people say he did it first. So
Oh, okay.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah, Doug was amazing and always a pleasure to play with. And he always had his like velvet suits from Granny Takes a Trip in London. And he was the first person I knew who was a Francophile, drank Perrier, and um, and got a what's that French car that goes up like this? I forget the name of the car, but anyway, rose tinted glasses, super
Yeah.
chill, and
Hip cat.
changing the world on his bass. So that's my Dougie Rauch story.
Oh, that's cool. And Phil said hello. So great to interact with you. Such an influence on me as you were on so many. Oh, that's great. And
Thank you, Phil. That's very
yeah.
kind.
Oh.
Any other
Well,
questions in there?
let me see. Yeah, I know it's I know you've got
Oh,
other.
I've got to go too. Yeah.
Uh, you know what? If you get a second, Michael, and you want to jump on this, it's on Facebook. If you could see these, and if there's anything you want to respond to or not. Um,
Okay.
but I won't keep you. I do want to say hello to Christian Thornton, my good friend here in Martha's Vineyard that owns the best restaurant on the island called Atria.
Really? Well,
And
that's saying
he's
something, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's
I've
a
never been.
fabulous
I've
place.
never been to the islands.
It's beautiful. It's
Yeah,
absolutely beautiful.
I gotta check it out sometime.
Well, if you make a trip to Boston, you're close. You
Yeah.
you have a place to land.
Yep.
So,
very good.
All right. Well, thank you so much for doing this. This has been
great to catch
such
up.
a treat.
Yeah.
And likewise too. And and we'll do a part 2 down the road because I feel like we really just hit the tip of the iceberg on this. So
sure.
I'll be
anytime.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, hang tight if you would for just 1 second. I'm going to end the stream and then we'll say goodbye in the room. But everybody, we appreciate you watching today. Big hand for Michael Shrieve. Clap your hands. And thanks for watching. Stay tuned for next week. And Michael, sit tight if you would for 1 second. But thanks, everybody.